exam prep session, and this is for PL-200, Microsoft Power Platform Functional Consultant. I'm Anupama Natarajan. I'll be your instructor for today's session. So we are in day 2, and this is part 2 of a 3-part session. And what we will be covering in today's session is around Module 4 and Module 5. Module 4, we will be covering how to make model-driven applications as well as Canvas applications using PowerApps. So the focus is going to be more around PowerApps in Module 4, which will be the first part of our session. So in this session, we will be going through an introduction to model-driven applications. What are the key application building blocks and design for model-driven applications? And how do you create model-driven charts and dashboards? And what are the different form elements and form components associated with model-driven applications. Followed by that, we will be looking at Canvas applications overview and some of the basic and fundamental elements that you need to know in relation to Canvas applications. So we will look at different ways how you create PowerApps applications, how you connect to different data sources, and last but not the least, we will also touch upon PowerApps portals and just to give you an idea around the different components within the PowerApps portals and how do you handle security, authentication, and authorization. So the cool thing is around you will get to know more about PowerApps here. And then in Module 5, we will be looking more into Power Automate. So before I further get into today's module, just a quick thing around the Q&A chat panel. So if you have any questions related to either today's session or the topics that we covered yesterday or anything in general with the Power Platform family, feel free to put that in the Q&A chat window. We have moderators available and who will be responding to your questions. So whether it's a technical question or anything general question that you have got, feel free to put that in the chat window so that you can get some good responses from our moderators here. So great. So with that note, with module 5, we'll be looking at Power Automate flows. So you will get a good introduction around Power Automate and what is the business value that you get out of Power Automate. I think we briefly touched upon these topics in yesterday's session as part of the Power Platform overview. We'll be deep diving to some of those concepts inside today's session. So what are the different types of Power Automate flows that you can create? And we touched upon 300 plus connectors in yesterday's session. So today we'll be looking at what are those connectors really mean and what is the advantage of those connectors and how do you go about using them. And finally, like you will also understand about the different type of flows, like how do you create new flows, how do you update the data, how do you query them, and finally, like where do you go and see the runs of the different Power Automate flows. So today's session is going to be really an interesting session which is going to cover some deep dive things around model-driven apps and Power Automate flows. And as a business consultant, what are the key things that you need to know about these particular components in here? Okay, so let us get started with Module 4, which is making Power Apps. So just a quick introduction to model-driven apps. So before I jump on to model-driven apps, Power Apps comprises of multiple app types. And one of the thing is model-driven apps. The other one is the Canvas applications. So what is the difference between these two? So that is the first important thing you need to understand. So when do you go down to the route of creating a model-driven app versus a Canvas application? So normally I will start in this way. So a lot of organizations, they may have a backend database, right? So they already have a data model and they want to just take the data model and expose an application in order to capture the data for that data model. And if you are in that scenario, mainly like you will go down the path of creating a model driven application. So where you are going to start with the data model first and build the application based on that. And also like a model driven application focuses on a component based approach to develop the application. So this is where the focus is not about designing fancy UIs. The focus is more about like capturing information and how do you go about using rich component focused approach for that. So with model driven applications, you can also build complex responsive apps. So when you talk about like accessing the application across different devices, you can do that with the model driven application. And because it is browser based and it is responsive, it can you can use it across any devices, no issues at all. And you can distribute the applications as a solution within model driven application quite easily. So the key point here is like model driven applications or normally applications which always start with a data model. And that's why here we say the apps that are connected to the Dataverse environment. So Dataverse, as I told you, is like a data repository for your applications sitting in your Power Platform family. So here we start with a data model. We create our tables, we create our columns, and then we establish the relationships. Once that is all concrete, then you start developing your application and building the UI over that. So if you think about rich, like what do you say, like a business process focused applications where you already got the data model available in there, then model driven applications is the way to go. So as I said, model driven application is more a component focused application development approach, doesn't require any code as such, and you can build applications that range from a simple application all the way to really complex application. So the main idea about a model driven application is you are actually starting with the modeling of your business data. So we also call it as a metadata driven architecture. So you can build applications without writing code, and that is the crux of your Power Platform family. And what you need to do is you always start with data. So when you talk about modeling your business data, you need to determine what is the data that is required for your app and how this data will be related to each other, which means we are talking here about building tables, columns, relationships. So these should be established in Dataverse, which pretty much forms the fundamental base for your model-driven applications. The next step is around defining your business process. Whenever you are developing an application, especially with model driven applications, you need to you're actually enforcing a consistent business process. So consistent process will always establish good practice within your business users. So you will clearly take them through the process of, okay, so you create a account, then you need to make sure you create the respective contacts. So it is like a wizard type of interface that you can build within model-driven applications. And these processes can be simple or complex. So you can have multi-screen processes quite easily, or you can just capture what you require in a single screen also quite easily. So model-driven applications will allow you to define your business processes. And finally, like once you have the data, once you have defined the process, it's all about building the application. So what you are seeing on this particular slide, this is a sample of a model-driven application. And see if it doesn't have a fancy UI or anything. So, but it will have all the meaningful information that you want to see in an application or things that you have to put it into the application. Like what is my active work that I'm thing I need to focus on, or like active challenges. I have some charts available in here, and also like some active ideas, some timeline information. So meaningful information you will get in here, not really a fancy UI, but it's more around data-driven applications. So key things that you are going to focus when it comes to model driven applications is data. As I said, that is the backbone, right? So you need to have the data ready and available, because without data, you can't start building a model driven application. You define the data, that is what your app will be using. Then you do the user interface, saying how my users are going to interact with the application. Then you have to define your logic. So this determines like what is my business process going to look like, what are the rules and the automation my application is going to have. And finally, visualization. So what type of data and reporting the application is going to show to the end users. So these are the key building blocks when you are thinking about model driven applications: the data, the user interface, the logic, and your visualization. If I break this down further in terms of building blocks, within data, you will go ahead and create tables, columns, and relationships. When it comes to user interface, you will be focusing around your application and also like a sitemap, forms, and views. When I just demonstrate you with model driven application, I'll walk you through what these building blocks really mean. When it comes to logic, you talk about business process flows, workflows and actions, business rules, and even Power Automate flows, because you can infuse that in your Power Apps applications, which I think I mentioned in yesterday's session around the components within Power Platform family. You can interchangeably use them across the board. So I can embed a Power Apps application inside Power BI, and I can bring in Power Automate flow inside Power Apps and vice versa. Visualization, like you can start building charts, dashboards, and even embed Power BI reports inside model driven applications. So some of the key modules I would say within a model driven application is we always start with a sitemap. So I'll show you what a sitemap really means, and then we will be looking at what are the forms that you need to create, then any views that we need to create associated with that. So the difference between forms and views is always going to be your read-only uh, screen. So if I want to see like, okay, what are my active cases or active pending cases that I have to look into, forms will be more around, okay, I want to go and create a case or update a case, or so it is more around CRUD operations. Views is more read-only layout of the data, where you can filter certain things. So you can filter things by status, or you can filter things by a user. So you can apply any type of filter and create n number of views in order to give a quick view of any pending things or items that you want your users to focus on. And of course, business process flows and charts. These are the other components that you can make available within the model driven application. So I talked about the sitemap, right? Like within the model driven application. So this is how a typical sitemap will look like. So you start here with a sitemap. When you start a blank model driven application, you won't have anything. And then you start building like, okay, what am I going to have in my model driven application? Am I going to have what entities I'm going to have from my backend, and what forms I'm going to expose, what views I'm going to show to the end users, any charts or dashboards associated. And you can see here, like, is there any business process flows that are going to be displayed in here. So once you define all these things, then you can save the application and you can go and play that. So this is what I will typically call it as the design. So here you don't spend too much time in terms of like, okay, I'm going to customize the UI or anything, but you will be making the right decisions here around what entities to expose and what forms and views that you're going to expose to update them. So with model driven applications, as you can see, the idea is all about getting your data versus data model in line, and you will be creating an application over that. So if you want to integrate with any third-party solutions or accelerators, you can still do that with the help of the model-driven applications. So key point to note here is like you have to be prepared with your data model, the business logic that you're going to apply, any dashboards that you require to create, and along with that, like any forms and views that you want to put it in there for your end users. Finally, wrapping up with any integration that is required. So how do you start working with creating a model-driven application? So we talked about everything starts with creation of tables, dashboards, forms, views, business processes, and so on. So when you want to create a new application, you normally go and create a new model-driven application. So let me quickly show you what I really mean here. So let me get PowerApps. So this is my PowerApps interface, and you can navigate to that using make.powerapps.com. So if you want to make your application from scratch, you can go here and start either a Canvas app or a model-driven app from blank. So when I say blank, pretty much nothing will be there, and you will be get started with the application itself. But sometimes like when you are new and you are learning about Power Apps, it will be always good to start with some guidance, right? And that's where the templates will play an important role for you. So if I go to home and if I just look at here, like you can also start building things using templates. So I can go here and click on all the different templates. So I can start from a template rather than starting from a blank application. So I have got quite a few applications, and you need to pick and choose whether you are going down the path of creating a model driven application or you are creating a Canvas application. So just based on the template, you can pretty much choose what type of application you want to create. So that is the first and foremost thing that I'll be looking at in terms of how do you go about and create the different applications. Cool. So the other way how you can go about creating the application is going into the apps and new app, and you can decide on whether you want to create a Canvas application or a model driven application. So this is really important that you go down this path and you understand what is the type of application you are creating here. So let me get back to model driven application, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go and create a blank application from here. So click on this. So there are two types of designers that are available when it comes to model driven applications. You can use a modern app designer, which is currently still in preview mode, or you can go ahead and use a classic app designer. So I'll use a classic app designer and click on create. And now the first thing I should be able to do here is like provide some details for my new app. So let me say model driven app demo. So this gives a unique name and I get a unique URL in here, and I can just look at that, and if you want to add a icon you can do that, but I'm going to use the default image as it is, and I'm going to hit on done. So once this is done, pretty much I'm ready in terms of starting to design. And you'll be thinking like, okay, what am I designing here? The crux of model driven application is all about designing the sitemap. So here what I'll be working on is like going and editing my sitemap. And here I have got the things around like the area, the group, and the sub area. So here I will just specifically look at and say, okay, I'm going to just use show and display my accounts information in here. So what I'm going to do is use my accounts entity. So here you can choose like, okay, are you going to create a dashboard here or an entity here? So I can go ahead and say like, okay, it is just an entity, and you can click on a drop down if you want to just choose an entity. So here I have got an account entity which is a pre-built entity that I'm going to use. And then what I'm going to do is click on save and close. So just highlighting to say like, okay, this is going to show my account entity, and I'm going to click on forms here. And this is going to see like, okay, are you going to show all the forms associated with accounts? I can decide on that, or I can just remove and say like, okay, show me the account form. That is really important. And when it comes to views, same thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just show what are my active accounts, show all the accounts associated, and also like anything around my active accounts. So here I pick and choose the views I want to show it to the end users when they are actually using my application. When it comes to charts, and I'm going to just say like, okay, show me the charts, the accounts by industry. And now I have made all my customization. So you can see here, you can pretty much show all the forms by default that is available for accounts, views, or charts and dashboards. But I'm just filtering about what really fundamental things that I want to show to my end users in my application. So now I can save it. So this is an important thing. So the app is now saved and it is ready. So now once it is ready, I can go ahead and publish it. So here I took only one entity, right? And that's what I'm just going and using here. But it doesn't matter. So you can add a number of entities based on what your application domain is about, and then you can start using it. So let me go here and hit on play. So here I'm actually going to go ahead and run my application, and this is going to showcase to me the entities that I am exposing. So as you can see here, my accounts entity is exposed, and also like it starts with what are my active accounts. So there isn't any dummy data available in here. That is the reason why you are seeing an empty screen. But the point to note here is you can look at a chart if you need to, or you can see like, okay, my accounts, and you can see all the active accounts and the views that you have really exposed. And that is the key point here. So this is I created from blank, and I haven't got any sample data or anything loaded in here. But if I want to do it in a bit different way, let me close this down. So I can go and, as I told you, like I can start my creating an application using a template. This is another way how you do that, because when you start with blank, you need to have data model created, sample data created, and so on. But in this case, like if I want to just create a model driven application, I can just go ahead and choose any particular thing in here. So let me see asset checkout, and I would say just create. We'll create a new environment. So we will be saying, so can create it. So this is going to go ahead and create. Okay, so I have used already. Let me use the environment that is available in here. So I'm going to use the existing environment and go ahead and use my templates. And let us kickstart with our asset checkout. Okay, so I'm not going to create a new environment here because I think there is an existing environment. So let us quickly show you a test app that we have got here. So here there are some apps that has been already created, and you can go ahead and use these test applications like by using via the templates, or as one I showed you, where you go ahead and create the application like the blank application and use that. So let me quickly show you why you saw the blank screen in there, because that is important for you to understand if you get into that scenario. So let me bring in the Power Platform Center. So this is the environment that I used. And one of the key thing in the environment is when you provision an environment, right? One of the key thing you need to keep into account is you will be creating a Dataverse database. So as you can see here, if you turn this on, In the next screen, you will have the ability to say like, okay, can I add some sample data to the entities? So I wanted to keep my entities really clean because when you are working in real world projects, you don't want to clog that with sample data rather than you want to use it with real data. So that's the reason like I wanted to showcase like if you're starting from blank, like it needs to be really clean. All your entities will be there and there won't be any data linked to that. But when you're practicing, what you can do is you can turn on like, okay, give me some sample data and you will be able to go ahead and use that sample data to create your application. So this is where the sample data you will be configuring as part of creating a new environment. So that explains to you why when we created the demo application, we had a blank application in there, even though like the account entity was there. So the account entity was part of the Dataverse table provisioning. So it is a two-step process. You can specify a database to be created as part of provisioning the environment. Similarly, you have the ability to say like, okay, add sample data or not also as part of provisioning your environment. So this is our account entity that we used. And if you look at data, and you will be able to see that pretty much like this is going to be empty in here. And of course, I think in yesterday's session with the Dataverse, you would have noticed like you can import data through inside Dataverse using this interface where you can pump it with some external data that you have got either sitting in your cloud or on-premises data stores. So getting back to our slides. So what we saw was a quick way of how do you create a new model-driven app. We started from a blank app. We worked on the site report, the sitemap, right? So the sitemap, we opened up the sitemap, that is our designer, and then we added the account entity. We decided on which particular form I want to showcase, and also like which particular view I want to showcase, along with charts and what is the other one is the dashboards and stuff. So once you have listed out what are the things you need to showcase, then you can save them and pretty much you can start playing your application, which is basically like running your application. So this is the app designer or the sitemap designer that we have been working on. The entire application navigation in your model driven app is driven by this sitemap. So when you start editing this sitemap, you define all the tables that you or entities that you are going to work with as part of your model driven app. This includes the key components around forms that you want to expose for those entities, the views, the charts, and dashboards. And as I showed you, like when I went to and created my model driven app, I removed all the unnecessary ones and showed only necessary ones. When I clicked on the account forms, by default, all the forms related with accounts has been pre-selected. But what I made a point is only choose the ones that I really require. And similarly, working with the sitemap designer. So key thing here is once I open up the sitemap, I can design on like, okay, what are the title is area is going to be, the sub areas are going to be, and I can start pulling in the details of those entities in here and then start configuring what forms I need to expose when people click on accounts or contacts. And these are some of the custom entities specific to here. So if you attended the Dataverse session yesterday, one of the key thing is the ability to use standard tables versus custom tables. So I would call accounts and contacts as the standard tables, while the property management related tables you are seeing here, these are custom tables that are created within Dataverse. Irrespective of whether it's a standard table or custom table, you can pretty much use both inside your model-driven application, and you can start customizing the forms and views that you need to show for these entities. The next part of the model-driven application is your charts and dashboards. So a lot of people, they'll be thinking when you are building like a lot of charts and dashboards, you will be always thinking about like how do I expose this in a visualization format. So the chart types that are supported in model-driven application includes columns, charts, bar charts, line charts, pie charts, funnel charts, tag charts, and donut charts. So these are some charts that are out of the box that are supported. And so you can use dashboards to show several areas of your model-driven app in a single UI. So you can create both system level dashboards as well as personal level dashboards in using model driven applications. So mainly to make it more sharing of your dashboards much easier with your users. So as you can see, the key around the type of charts, because this is some of a prerequisite that you need to know what type of charts that you can create within the model driven applications. So there are two types of charts, as I told you, like system or personal charts, and variety of charts like bar, column, area, line that you can go ahead and do that. So if you are creating personal charts, normally you create that if you have something more specific for the role. So personal charts are something that you can share it with other users. And system charts, these are available to all the users. So personal charts, you can create it and you can share it with the specific users if you need to. And one of the key thing, whether you create a system chart or a personal chart, you can always include data from records from a single table only. So that is something to keep in mind. So few things like when you use standard tables, some of the charts that are come out of the box, but when you create a custom table, you need to make sure that you create any particular charts that you require that is based on the attributes that you add to your custom table. So keep in mind when you deal with custom tables in Dataverse, then probably you need to start working out around what type of charts and things that you need to expose for your end users. So charts is one thing and dashboards is another thing. So if you want to show a dashboard, you can show several areas of your app in a single display, and that is the purpose of the dashboard. So for instance, like if you are a customer service manager, right? So you need to know like how many cases are sitting in the pending area so that you can easily assign those cases allocated to your representatives. So there are again two types of dashboards also you can create similar to charts, the user dashboards and system dashboards. So what you can do is any user can create a dashboard which will be either visible only to them, or as an admin, you can create system dashboards, and when you publish it, pretty much you can just make it visible for all the users. So admin dashboards and user dashboards, again, the type of dashboards that you can create. Again, it's all with the context, right? So you can apply security rules also where users with the appropriate security role can also like share the dashboards with other users. So if you are all part of the marketing security role, then probably as a marketing user, you can create a dashboard and you can start sharing it with your peers. So the security role is going to play an important part when you are actually designing dashboards and you're going to share it with your users. So when it comes to model-driven applications, and if you want to design the forms, right? So normally forms are organized like I have a header, I have a body, and I have a footer, and then you can start customizing the things that you need within the form. So keep in mind, like you can't design too much of fancy UIs, as I mentioned, with the model-driven application, and that is something you have to be keeping in mind. So let me quickly showcase the model-driven application that we have been working on. So if I click on edit, so this is going to open my sitemap editor. So hit on forms and you can see the account, and I've just clicked on edit. just to showcase to you like how does a form typically look like. And so as I said, like it's not about the fancy UI here, it's more about the ability to expose the data so that it can be captured. Okay, when we when we were creating the things, like we said, like, okay, there are two types of interfaces, UI interfaces we saw when we created a model-driven app, which is the modern UI and the classic UI. So this is the modern UI, which is currently in preview. So as you can see, the look and feel is like more like a modern view. So here you have the account information, the address information. These are some of the attributes that you have they have exposed with the account form. And also, like you can see, this is your header and this is your body, and then you have a bit of a footer in there. So your header information, your footer information, and if you look at it, this is the summary information and detail information. So these are two tabs that you have got here. And then you can start looking at the account information, and then you can see the different attributes that you are capturing as part of that. So this is your modern UI, right? I can switch to classic UI also, just to showcase to you. As you know, modern UI is still in preview, and classic UI, you can see like why Microsoft started working on a modern UI, because I think the look and feel is more or less in typical older CRM type of view. So when they had a customer relationship management and they had a UI, so pretty much they took over that UI when they built the modern driven application, but they are more enhancing that into this modern view currently. Okay, while this is loading, sometimes when I share the screen, it takes a bit of time to load it. So I'll just showcase it to you once it gets loaded here. So that is the key point here with the modern view, you will be able to see that. And this is where I go and start customizing the view here. So what form field I'm going to add, and what are they, where am I going to add? Is it going to be on the header, or is it going to be on the detail? This is all is going to be designed in this interface. And once you finish creating your form, you can save it and move on to the next form. So that's how it has been organized. This has been loaded. So this is your classic view. So as usual, you can see here, this has got a typical old CRM view. And here, same thing, the tabs are listed in here. So you know the summary and detail information. And this is my account entity, and all the attributes are exposed. So I can just drag and drop in the detail here, and I can showcase it. So header, summary, details, and footer. So this is your classic view. Just in case if you haven't looked at classic view before, this is how a typical classic view will look like. So a form doesn't stuck with only one form. With a model-driven application, you can just create multiple forms. So there are different types of forms that you can create. You can create a main form. You can create use a create form or a quick view form or even a card type of form. So you have the ability to create any type of forms, as you can see here. And the form elements which I showcased to you. So you can just go and have standard column controls in there. You can add custom controls. You can have any specific specialized controls that you want to use. So you have got the full flexibility that you can do that. But normally when I say out of the box creations, like I will be going with out of the box forms. And unless and until I need to go and involve a developer and to create custom controls and things. Mainly custom controls, like if you want to have reusable components across the different forms, you build it once, reuse it multiple times, and that's how you will go ahead and do that. What are some of the specialized forms that we are talking here? So when it comes to model-driven applications, you can include these type of components quite easily in your app. So you can include a timeline control, you can include a editable subgrid, iframe. If you want to just load the data into an iframe, you can do that. Bing maps, timer control. Quite easily, you can go ahead and add these type of specialized form components in there. Key point is around security. So anything that you do, whether it is application or something, in Power Apps, it always uses role-based security for sharing. So normally you create a security role, which pretty much defines what privileges that you need to provide for that role within the application. So then you decide on which application users need to be assigned to those roles. So you can assign roles to an individual user or even to the teams. Once the role is assigned, then probably they get the level of permissions that they require. So if you want to share an application, so you designed an application, and if you really want to share an application, you need to be having the environment admin or sysadmin role to do that. So make sure that you have got appropriate permissions. And from the exam prep perspective, I will be focusing more around permissions, like what are the different roles that are available that you can go ahead and create, and what permissions each and every role within Power Apps provides you with. So that is again good to understand, both from an exam perspective as well as from a day-to-day scenario perspective. So once that is done, then you share the link, and once the link is available for the user, provided if they have the right privileges, they will be able to use your model-driven application that you have developed. So just to do a quick recap on that, so you can easily create a model-driven application using Power Apps. You can add components to your application. You can create a form, edit a form. You can open and add a view in the app designer, which is the sitemap designer that we saw. And you can add a column to your view. And we saw the different parts of your form, like the header, detail, and the footer. And finally, once you make all your customizations, then you can basically publish your application. Once the application is published, pretty much then it is readily available for sharing with other users. You can test the app, and finally, once you're happy with that, then you can share it with your end users. And we quickly saw a model-driven application. How do we go about developing it? What we will do is we will quickly look at a brief overview about Canvas applications, and then we will jump into creating a simple Canvas application. Okay. So Canvas applications, you can design that by dragging and dropping elements onto a canvas. So what it really means here. So when do you choose a Canvas application is basically when you want to have full control on the UI. So when you saw the model-driven application, right? So pretty much you were able to see, like I have created a model-driven application, and I'm able to see that information quite easily. So with the Canvas application, like it is not that predefined UI I'll be going with. I want a full ability to customize my UI as I need. So that is what the purpose of a Canvas application is really. So if you need a full control on the UI, go with it. And you don't have this concept of starting with a data model, right? So here with Canvas application, you can just go with a blank sheet of paper and say like, okay, I haven't got anything. My idea is, I know I need to capture some information, but I want to design the UI first, UI elements, and then I will start building the application. So if you are in that type of requirement need, then probably Canvas application is the way to go. So with Power Apps Studio, what you can do is with Canvas applications, you can use Power Apps Studio to design the applications. So I will showcase to you shortly, like what does this Power Apps Studio really mean. So let me jump on to my Power Apps environment in here. So same thing like how I showcased with model driven applications, the same thing you can do with Canvas applications. You can create a Canvas application from blank, or you can go ahead and start with a template. So you can click on all templates and you can see the different templates that you have got even for the Canvas application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a sample Canvas application, and here we will go and start building our application of our own. So I'm going to start with loading some data. So here I will start with an Excel, or maybe I'll just start with my OneDrive because already I have an Excel spreadsheet. So I clicked on show me the different data sources from my home screen, and what I'm going to do is I have to establish a connection with my OneDrive for Business because I have a file which is sitting in there. I want to use the file as a mechanism to generate an app. So let me get this loaded in here. So while you look here, PowerApps Studio, just to have a look and feel on things here. So we will be showcasing this shortly around how do you go ahead and create your Canvas applications using the PowerApps Studio. So that is getting ready here. So when it comes to Canvas applications, PowerApps Studio is the one which you will be using in order to edit the Canvas application. So as you can see here, you have the different controls here, which you will be seeing when we edit a Canvas application. And then you can see all the other UI interfaces that you can create. Okay, so here my connections are here. So I have a Dataverse connection. I'll create a new connection. And here I'm going to just look at OneDrive for Business, create the connection. So this is like I can connect to any data source as I require to build a Canvas application. So that's what I'm going to do here. So we are not just tied with Dataverse, and you can also use a spreadsheet or something in order to build a Canvas application to start with. So I have got a spreadsheet which I'm going to choose, and this spreadsheet has got a table. I'm going to connect to that table in here. So now what it is doing is PowerApps is a bit clever because it can take up a spreadsheet and it will automatically design saying like, okay, I'm going to, based on the data that you have got, I'm going to go and create a sample application for you, which you can start customizing to meet your needs using PowerApps Studio. So this is the PowerApps Studio. And as you can see here, I had just selected a spreadsheet from my OneDrive, but PowerApps is clever enough to create me a 3-screen application based on the data that I have got in here. So if I hit on play here, I can see the application. So this shows me the list of items, and I can click on here. I can see the detail. So there are 3 screens that it has created for me. The first screen, I will call this as a browse screen. So this is the screen that appears by default. A few things that you can do here is you can do sorting, and so I can see all the things are now sorted by descending and ascending again. Then I can do filtering. So if I want to just focus on tile, and I can just say give me the tile based records in here if I need to. So it is now showing everything that has got tile in associated in that. Or I can just get rid of them, and it shows all the